Okay, well, I guess we can get going. Morning, everyone. We've got quite a jam-packed program for today. Two presenters on the topic of risk and compliance in trying times. Maybe just by introduction, I'm Bos van Stramrood, heading up GRC solutions at LexisNexis, and I'll be your facilitator for today. Again, a very warm welcome, and I trust you're going to really enjoy today's session. We've got two very good speakers. And since it's Women's Month, we also decided to stick with the women this morning. Right, so today's session is about risk and compliance in trying times, and I'm specifically thinking about the pandemic that we've been sitting with over the last year and a half, and which it seems like it's not really going to go away. And listening to an expert yesterday again, it seems like it's here to stay. I don't know for how long, but it almost sounds like forever, and we've got to live with it. There's the POPIA Act from a regulatory point of view, and then there's also the civil unrests, which if you look at or if you listen to political analysts, doesn't really sound like it's going to go away that easily. And these are all trying times and things that we need to work with. And I think the inevitable is change. And the questions here are, how do we deal with change? And we know that it's constantly going to, it's going to continue. I'm quite confident that you will find great value out of today's session. And remember, if there are any questions, please post them in the question box. We do have a question box. If you have a look at the bottom there, there's a questions and answers box. So if you've got very specific questions to the presenters, please post them there. If you've got questions to LexisNexis, you can also do it there. During the presentations, I'll try and answer those. And then, if you just want to chat and maybe if you have technical difficulties, we've got Pam and Josie in the background that will help with that. Please post those in the chat box. And if you just want to generally chat, also use that. If we don't get to all of your questions today, we will respond by email as well. Or also feel free to contact LexisNexis afterwards. Before we start, just a quick a few house rules. Please keep your mics on mute. I don't know if you can switch it on, but please keep it on mute if you can. For the duration of the webinar, let's use the question and answers and chat boxes. Then just, I did mention Josie and Pam will be in the background with any questions and support. Then I mentioned the questions and answers functionality, so please post your questions there. We will deal with those right at the end. There will also be a poll running right at the end or towards the end when we start with questions and answers. It'll be great if you can answer those questions because it'll also help us with future webinars and LexisNexis as a business and how to support and be in partnership with you. Yeah, so that is basically it. If the poll box appears, then do know that you can move that around. It may be in the way of what you want to see in the presentations, but do know that you can move it around, and please just answer that. So if I can then move over to, we've got two great presenters today, and we talk about risk and compliance. The one we'll look at it from a high level, and those of you that maybe it's part of IRMSA, the Institute of Risk Management, will know her pretty well, and it's Gillian. And then on the other end, we've got Stephanie, working for a large retail corporation, and it will share her knowledge and her ideas and views on how we can deal with all of these things that are happening in and around us. So if I can then start with Gillian le Cordeur. Gillian is a co-founder and director of YourHub, new business created. Up until very recently, she was also the CEO of IRMSA, and as I said, if you've been a member of IRMSA, you would know her pretty well. She basically, over the last decade, brought IRMSA from a small institute to an institute that really support the profession in a big way, and also make sure that there's recognition as IRMSA being the only professional body for risk management in South Africa, and the elevation of risk professionals in the business arena. She's really done a lot for the risk professionals. During this time, Gillian became also passionate about the link between strategy and risk management, and that's what she's been working on nowadays. She's got a huge impact in this area, and Gillian will give us today better insights to risk and compliance, and specifically accelerated into the spotlight. How does risk and compliance get accelerated into the spotlight? So without further ado, let me move over and hand over to Gillian. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bosman, for the introduction. It's so good to see you. Let me just quickly share my screen so we can get going. I hope that we can see the presentation, but thank you so much. So I'm sure there are quite a few folk in your offices and in your home offices this morning where we have had a journey together at the Institute of Risk Management South Africa. And it's only since July that I've now moved over to YourHub, which we started about 2 years ago. So Boss, not such a new company. I actually started YourHub about 2 years ago with Angela Cherrington, the previous CEO of the Institute of Directors. And so we've been quite busy working in different areas for the last couple of years, but officially for me, it's been the last month and a half, which has been really excited, but still a very strong link to IRMSA. And obviously passion for risk still very, very strong and in my blood. But let's get going. I think I'm really excited to be here this morning, and a huge thank you to LexisNexis for the invitation. Always a pleasure to share a landscape and platform with LexisNexis and their dynamic team. So my discussion this morning is really looking at risk and compliance, and I will confess from the onset, you're going to hear a lot more risk coming into my conversation, but there's a clear link to compliance as well throughout, but really looking at how it's been accelerated into the spotlight in the last 20 months. So let's just get going. So having a look at what really, and I say clapped us, because if you look at February, March last year, and this little bugger came along and really messed up what we had planned, what our strategies were for 2020, whether we had this on our risk radar or not, or the extent that a pandemic would hit us, I don't think many organizations or risk or compliance professionals had this impact as heavily as it impacted us. If we look at, last year during March and April, as we went into lockdown, I mean, it was quite surreal how we suddenly had this environment where nothing was happening, where our towns were quiet and everything just stopped, and our organizations basically stopped as well. We became used to, and I'm sure many of you will chuckle at this, the banana bread recipes and making our own Friday night pizza, because there was nothing like that. And suddenly our lives changed completely. And of course, the ease of getting used to our family meetings. I mean, 2 years ago, if we had said, oh, we're going to have a family meeting with Cyril Ramaphosa, you would have laughed. We would have laughed at, like, what does that mean? And now it's just, oh, we've got a family meeting this Sunday and we don't even blink anymore. And so this has really became our reality of what it is. But with our banana bread recipes and our pizzas and everything, the actual impact to the country on the other side, for me, it was, oh, I miss traveling and I miss going on holidays and I miss being in the office with my team. I miss having the personal meetings. I miss hugging people. But the impact on the country has been horrific, as we all know, and the impact on the economies. We're on the other side of the fence, where people have lost jobs, restaurants closed, companies have closed. We've seen the impact on our organizations, where whether you're an SME, a small restaurant or a small business, to the largest corporations where we've had to downsize, we've seen the knock on the economy, on our strategies and what we had set out and our normal ways of working. The impact has been huge. And so the role of the risk and compliance officer has definitely had to shift in the last 2 years. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But with all of this, I want to talk about how resilient were we? How resilient, and I definitely saw it at the beginning of this year, is that we'd struggled. So many organizations did not have a BCM plan in place. They may not have been as resilient, but very quickly we had to digitize. We had to have our workforces at home. We needed to change. Some organizations had those things in place already and were a hell of a lot more resilient, but everyone had to catch up. So when we started 2021, I think organizations, when we started, it was a lot easier easing, and I didn't feel that frantic stress, that frantic crisis to move our organizations because we'd already done it. And I think we did show resilience as people and as organizations. As I said, some better than others. However, I wonder if this you were ready for. So this July, how heavily were you impacted? Were you ready for this? Because it was almost like, wow, we've just come through the pandemic, and then we got again, and I'm going to use the word again, clapped again. We were smacked with this in July, and I wonder how many organizations were really ready. Was this on your risk radar? Were you prepared? So the reason I asked that question is because last year in April, on behalf of IRMSA, the CEO of the Institute of Risk Management, South Africa, we were liaising a lot with the presidency. And on the 3rd of April last year, I sent a letter to President Ramaphosa, and and it's the second paragraph, and this just will resonate with you. So we spoke about the two most significant risks to have emerged from the pandemic. It was social unrest with a likely increase in crime. We said that, and poverty, and we said that if left untreated, they result in riots, looting, damage to property. Now, remember, we wrote this on the 3rd of April, 2020, and you're probably sitting there thinking, what? And they didn't listen. And then we spoke about unemployment and poverty and hunger and all of that. And for those of you who were involved last year with IRMSA and the Food Forward SA campaign, I mean, we tried to tackle that, and we with other professional bodies, we raised over 81 million rand. But that didn't even touch, the issue, to be honest with you. It really did help. But when we get back to July and we think, but IRMSA said there would be riots, looting, etc., damage to property. I mean, gosh, there we are. Boom, it happened. So the question is, and I'm sure you're asking this as you sit here now, so we told them that this was going to happen. We stressed that it would be happening. And this was not the only correspondence that we sent, by the way. But the question was, but why didn't they listen? Why didn't they hear us? And so that to me was it's a huge question, but it's not the first time that I've asked the question when risk and compliance speaks in organizations, and not just with this government and whatever reasons there may be, but why didn't they listen to the risk professional who's saying this is going to happen if we don't manage the risk? And so I go back to years ago. We were involved with the water project, the water issue in Cape Town. You'll remember that when you were showering with a bucket and not flushing the toilet, and we were worried about day zero of water. The ESCOM issues of load shedding in 2007, KPMG, SAA. I can just go on with the various governance issues that have been over the last decade or 15 years. And for each of them, we went in and we had a look at the risk registers of each of these organizations and various others, and all of them had red flagged these issues within their risk registers to their governing bodies, to their boards. And so again, the question is, so why didn't they listen? And that is a huge question. And it's something that we started tackling and really enabling organizations to better understand the role of risk management in organizations. And so for me, in the last 20 months, and particularly last year, we saw how the risk professionals and compliance, your C-suite, your chief risk officer, your chief compliance officer, suddenly they had a better seat at that table with the executives, with the CEO. I mean, from my point of view and that of the Institute, from when I was there, and many risk professionals, we know that there's a significant role for your CRO at that board from that inception of risk and strategy. And likewise, we know that there's studies where they've seen that chief compliance officer is also going to be at the right-hand side of your CEO in the next couple of years, if they're not already. So you've got your CRO and your chief compliance officer that should be sitting at that table. Because if your organization is not listening, we need to work out why, because we have seen a shift. We're seeing how organizations are evolving and taking these roles seriously. So I'm going to ask you a question. In the last 20 months in your role as either a risk or compliance officer, were you pulled closer to leadership? Were you pulled closer to the decision-making and the strategy? Yes or no? So only you can answer that. If yes, congratulations. It means there's been that shift in your risk culture within your organization or within your compliance culture, or that combination of. If no, then shall we probe a little bit and ask, well, how do we take that space? And so the way that I want to tackle that for you is, let's ask some more questions. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and you need to answer this. And I need you to just think, and I need you to really ask the questions against your role and how your organization is working. And let's see. So let's explore this, and then let's see if we can tackle it. So when you're presenting to the board or the executive, well, first of all, are you presenting to the board and executive? And I want to talk from a risk point of view. And so what are you presenting? So the first thing is, are you presenting? If not, then that's a major shift there. We need to be presenting. We need to be directly in contact as that senior risk person. We need to be presenting the risk directly there. And now what are you presenting? And this is important. So is it the risk register and your traditional risk reporting? So your big fat pack that you give to your board? In your risks, are you presenting on emerging risks? Yes or no? This is very important. Are you talking about the threats and opportunity, but I'm talking about the now? Are you using systems thinking? Are you using scenarios, that what if, there are various scenarios of what could happen? Because we know with boards and executives now, they're not interested in that traditional risk register and risk reporting. Yes, they're vital in terms of how you determine what is happening in the landscape. They want to know what the emerging risks are now, not what we worked on a month ago and what we worried about a year ago, and the threats and opportunities. So what are those threats now with those emerging risks, and what are the opportunities? So I know that in the last 20 months, those opportunities have been endless for many organizations, and we've seen a shift in organizations taking new space. So that is what your board and execs need. They want you to be part of that big thinking. Are you using systems thinking? Are you thinking of your scenarios, the what ifs? If we do this, this will happen. If we do this, this will happen. So they want to understand. So I need you to think in your reporting, do you bring in these, and very quick as well, they don't have time. I've seen with myself on boards and so on, I don't have time to read these huge bundles of risk register and risk reporting. I want to know about these 4 areas. So are you positioned again? So how do we get this right? How do we get it right? So are you having the right conversation? So do you have that right conversation with your executives, with your organizations, with your teams that are working? Do you know the business better than anyone? Because you really do. You need to be able to talk and look at it from any angle. And that comes with a lot of what ifs, having the conversations, those what ifs, what if this happens? It comes with that collaboration. Are you talking business value? And that comes back to that risk register and what do the boards need? They need to understand what the business value is from your risk and compliance point of view. Are you demonstrating the risk impact on performance and the return on investment? Because if you are not, they want to know in rands and cents now where the impact will be. And there are various ways to determine that, of course, but that is what they need to know, because they need to know about that business value. Are you creating relevant information that they need? So we're talking about those emerging risks, we're talking about the threats and opportunities, but the now. Are you being more relevant? Because now that whole landscape has shifted. You need to show your relevance and the resilience that you have, because you need to be agile, you need to be flexible at all times. And then that responsive to change, being resilient and relevant at that point, because the landscape constantly changes. So if you did not have the looting and so on your risk radar, you've got to think about what if, because what's going to come next, because it's happened. That risk has materialized, and now we're looking at major impacts again on the economy. But what is going to be the what if? What is next? Is it a next pandemic? Is it going to be a huge political shift? Because we've got our elections coming up. or what else is going to be there. And you've got to play with that, with the what ifs, and be prepared for that as well. Looking at your landscape, all right? Then using tools for scenarios, modeling, predictive capabilities. There's terrific software out there. And then, of course, the LexisNexis software that they've got available, because we've seen so many organizations with both their risk and compliance functions using Excel spreadsheets still using, where they're trying to, they're sitting and they're spending more time on this Excel spreadsheet when there are tools available, because you need to be spending more time looking at the scenarios, looking more at the stats, looking more at the quants and how it impacts. What is the value to that business? So if you're not using a tool capably at the moment, then it's really time to shift that, because I mean, we're living in this digitized world right now. And so if there isn't software or tools that you are using and constantly upskilling with it, then we're going to be left behind. And so that for me is significant. And then, of course, the biggie, and this is what every organization wants right now, because in such an uncertain time where we are looking at the sustainability of all of our organizations, how do we exploit the opportunities? And this is it's a huge thing where your roles can play a part and you can have that voice. It's crucial. We need to create risk intelligent organizations and people within the organization. So keeping in mind that this organization needs to embrace risk and compliance, we need to shift the thinking of what they think traditional risk management and compliance is as well. And that also starts with the people, and throughout, from the top to the bottom to the top, in every which way. Because for you to be able to do that collaboration with the people in your organizations, because you cannot be everything. And you're not going to know everything. You're not going to get to know every part of your business without that collaboration. So it's key. So how do we do that? And it comes through risk intelligence. And this is a doc many of you have seen, looking at risk culture in organizations, where we really rely on the tone at the top to set that risk intelligence in the organization. And so what we did at IRMSA in the last couple of years, we've really, we've debated this, and we need to turn risk culture upside down in organizations to ensure that we have got risk intelligence, risk intelligent organizations, that this culture is pervasive throughout your organization, and moving not IQ to EQ, but back again as well, because we're asking you to use that EQ and how do we collaborate? How do we work with other parts of the organization? And how do we look at qualitative risk? But then we're asking you to get back to that IQ as well in terms of quantifying it. So this role of your risk and compliance officer, the officers within the organization, has become such a huge shift in how we saw traditionally. I mean, when I started at the Institute 10 years ago, you know, it was really risk and compliance, such tick box exercises where it was almost, you know, we have to have these in our organizations. But wow, in the last 10 years, the way that we've seen these roles evolving it's been significant. And I've seen 3 major shifts and in the roles, but that role of that risk professional, the compliance officer at the head table, and then running through the organization, extremely important. And so I love looking at, well, so the organizations that are getting it right, and we've got our compliance and our risk folk right at the top that are really in the thick of things. What did they do? And what did they do to get it right? And so it was definitely looking at the integration of strategy, risk, looking at, and I love the integration of strategy, risk, and resilience, and pulling compliance in there and making sure that that little living world is working optimally. You know, because it needs to inform the decision making of the organization. We shouldn't be making any decisions. We shouldn't be moving forward without that. Cultivating, as I said, the strong risk culture, and then looking at risk management and transforming it effectively through collaborative approaches. You know, it's a team effort. You can't do it in a silo. So any silo approach from those roles cannot inform a resilient and sustainable organization, not at all. And then adding the quantitative risk intelligence and predictive capability. And you know, there are various ways, you know, cutting your insurance spend through strong risk management processes, looking at how there are less incidents, less shocks, surprises, you know. So go back to July. Was that looting, was the instability in South Africa Did it come as an absolute shock to you, or was it already there on your radar? Then that shock is less of a discussion, that surprise to your organization. Did you have things in place? And so that is where we can actually demonstrate that we could have quantified what that loss was. And then looking at, and there are other ways to quantify, of course, as well, but then looking at linking risk to what matters and reporting the information that really counts. And I think it comes through that show me, don't tell me. And I think if we go back to those risk registers that I alluded to earlier, with 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, it's more of a tell me where it's not a show me. And I think we need to demonstrate the relevance of these roles and the work that is being done. And we need to start shifting. Because if we look at what COVID did last year, let's think about COVID. You did not know at the beginning of last year that you were going to completely digitize your organization, that you're going to shift every single thing within your strategy. There were things that we did in the last year where we digitized our workforces and we changed how we were working in the cloud and our opportunities. We had these in our radar for the next, 5 to 7 years, 3 to 5 years in our strategies. And what it did is that it accelerated everything we did. And what we were going to do in 5 to 7 years, we did in 5 to 7 months. I mean, it was excellent. We saw some amazing things there. But what did it do to you as either a risk officer or a compliance officer? Because now the risk officer is looking at those opportunities and we cannot miss this. And then at the same time, you've got your compliance officer who's trying to balance this opportunity from a compliance point of view, that we don't get completely out of hand and that we do something that we're going to feel later that's going to impact us again. So it's really changed that role. And so this is the opportunity where we have been accelerated into the spotlight. And so we don't have, well, you didn't listen to me, or gosh, we missed this opportunity. Oh, you know, I look at Checkers 6060 and I love looking at them as a case study, and they just continue to amaze me. But I'll be honest with you, and apologies to if there are any professionals from Checkers, but I didn't expect them to take that leading role in being the most transformed in the last year of all our providers. If I look at, you know, those big providers in terms of looking at Checkers, and I love what they've done. You know, I didn't shop regularly at Checkers, and now suddenly I'm like the Checkers 6060 sort of #1 fan, and you see them delivering frequently to my home. Also, I mean, if you look at all of these other brands, but there are so many, but I just chose a couple. And, you know, before it used to be, okay, so my child's birthday is in March, so let me book on Take-A-Lot, and it might take a few weeks, and let's be prepared. Now it's like, oh, I like this, book it on Take-A-Lot. Next day, it's at my doorstep. I mean, it's phenomenal the things we've seen transforming. But the question is, for a lot of organizations, if you'll see there's that black box there with a question mark, some organizations were left behind because they were waiting for that new normal. And I think that role of that risk professional, the compliance person, to control what we're doing and to make sure that we've got our controls in place. Why did we wait? Because there isn't going to be a new normal. And so if they're still waiting for normal to come back, or some kind of normality, like Bosman said in the intro, you know, it's here to stay. You know, we need to be prepared for how long is this? We don't know. So it's almost like, let's get our butts in gear, because if we weren't doing it, we need to do it, and we need to very quickly catch up, or our organizations will not make it. And we need to make sure that we've got that voice, because uncertainty is not going anywhere. And so last week we had our Compliance Institute of Southern Africa conference. And if you attended, it was really, it was phenomenal. And Richard Mulholland was one of the speakers there, and he's one of those change agents and looking at futures and so on. And he said that it's not going anywhere, and we know that. So organizations that are sitting waiting for a better day, it is now your role to not only tell them that this uncertainty is not going anywhere, but to move them quickly and demonstrate what opportunities are available. And that risk and compliance cannot just be about the threats, it's about those opportunities. And so what does it mean for you as an organization? And I'll leave that with you, because we want to see you as these professionals moving forward. And if you go back and you reflect on those questions that are asked, you know, are you ready? Are you performing those various areas where I asked you the yes and no's and so on? If not, then you need to think about how do you do that? How do you start having the right conversations? How do you take the rightful place at that table? And so with that, I'll leave you with it. And I thank you very much to LexisNexis for having me this morning. There are my contact details. It's my new details at Gillian at YourHub. And it's really been a pleasure just sharing my thoughts and my views on where we find ourselves at the moment. So thank you so much. Bosman, am I handing back to you?
Yep, most definitely. Thanks, Joel, and thanks for a lot of food for thought, and for your practical advice and a presentation to the point. Thank you so much for this morning, and we will obviously get some questions and answers. I see I've got very limited time to, between the two presentations, so I will get back to some of the key notes from your presentation right at the end. But thank you so much again for your presentation and your knowledge and sharing that knowledge with us and advice. I do want to remind everybody that there's a question and answer box, so please put your questions in that box, and we will deal with it right at the end. If we cannot deal with it at the end, we will get back to you via email. Jill has also put her details there to the end, and so if you do have any specific questions for her directly, then you know how to contact her. It is now my privilege to also introduce to you Stephanie Reddy. We'll be talking about adapting to our new reality, and she's really speaking from a practical point of view. Stephanie Reddy is a regulatory manager at the Massmart Group, part of Walmart. She provides regulatory support to the ethics and compliance team, ensuring the business regulatory compliance. We will be speaking on the impact of COVID-19 and the latest civil unrest. I think we all know how, well, we don't really know all the details, but we know that Massmart has been affected quite badly during the civil unrest. So we'll be speaking about the latest civil unrest on retailers and then the importance of compliance for businesses seeking a solution-oriented approach to the current GRC concerns. Thank you, Stephanie, for joining us today, and we're looking forward to hearing you.
Thank you, Bosman. I appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation from Lexis and yourself. I think that was a great presentation from Gillian and lots to think about. Today, I'm here to speak from a practical point of view and how it's impacted Massmart as a retailer. I think last year, ringing in the year of 2020, we had new hopes and dreams and strategy sessions with our teams, and with some hope for a brighter future, I would say. And then we fast forward quickly to March 2020, and we were all waiting for the much anticipated speech from our president. The words that came out of his mouth were, if I remember, as a consequence, the National Coronavirus Command Council has decided to enforce a nationwide lockdown for 21 days. And from March 26th to the 16th of April, all South Africans will have to stay at home. Me being an avid movie fanatic, this sounded like a scene playing from Armageddon or Contagion. I'm sure most of you are familiar with these movies. And I don't think anyone was prepared for the COVID-19 pandemic. But looking at Massmart and as a company, we have always taken pride and ensuring that our stores are safe and our products are safe, and hygiene is a big focus of ours. And the moment we heard the first case, the first confirmed case in South Africa, we redoubled our health and safety measures, and we implemented new procedures at all our stores. The long-term impact of COVID is still unknown, and as a business, we need to keep evolving and start adapting to new ways of working. I think Gillian has mentioned this, and I'm sure you've heard lots of speakers mention the word accelerate. Apart from upping our safety and hygiene in our business, it forced us to accelerate some plans very fast, and which obviously creates new risks for compliance and our risk teams. And it's so critical for compliance to identify these risks and also ensure the smooth execution of these plans. If you could move on to the next slide, please. From a practical point of view, I just wanted to share some of the implications that we had at Massmart. The lockdown restrictions resulted in our builder store being closed for over a month, and other operations, Cambridge, Massmart, Macro, Game, these were, we were limited to only selling essential items during lockdown level 5. And of course, liquor trading, completely banned for 40% of the year and restricted for an additional 27%, leaving us only 33% of the year for normal liquor trading. And for those of you who know, our stores are bigger liquor, Macro, Game. Tobacco sales were also banned during both lockdown levels 5 and 4. And this was only in South Africa. Just bearing in mind, Massmart operates in 13 African countries. So with the restrictions being different to all these countries, it was quite complicated for us. The COVID-19 pandemic has definitely left companies with financial and operational challenges. Given those challenges, it often forces companies, to turn their attention away from compliance and sometimes even cut corners. At Massmart, this definitely is not the case, and we definitely understand the risk of non-compliance. And fortunately enough, being part of Walmart, the largest retailer of the world, we are fortunate to leverage from them as well. It was time for our compliance to step up in South Africa and the African countries, and even to support the business even more. And from our leadership team, even pre-COVID, the vision of them was always to support our business partners with compliance expertise, flexibility, and a solution-oriented approach. We needed to constantly upskill our compliance team and understand the risk landscape and make informed business decisions to proactively identify and mitigate risk. And we needed to empower our business, helping them to do what is right all the time. We understood that we are a retail business. Our Chief Ethics Compliance Officer, keeping in Bosman's team, it's Women's Month, is Louise Aleke Walters. And in most of our meetings, she'll always start off with saying, remember, we are a business, we are a retail business, and we're not a compliance business. What does this mean for us, that we are a retail business? We need to understand our retail business, and we need to understand that we are not a compliance business. We need to add value while we protect our company, our shareholders, and our associates. And most importantly, we need to protect our customers. During this COVID-19 pandemic, we had to constantly assess and reassess the relevant risks and consider what can go wrong. We needed to embed ourselves in our business. What does it mean by embedding ourselves in our business? We need to have a seat at the table in all areas of our business. We cannot operate in isolation. And by having a seat at the table, it allowed us to have the lead on several critical responses that should be taken in nature, but may have taken a different priority during this crisis. If we look back at the 2008 financial crisis, and I'm looking at the US, or especially, enforcement activities increased. And despite COVID being a priority, we could not lose sight on other areas of compliance like antitrust, trust competition laws, data privacy, anti-corruption, food safety, product safety. We had to make sure that we are on top of our game. In one of our conferences, our Walmart conferences, our CEO, Doug McMillan, led with something that really resonates with me. And it said that We need to act in ways that our kids will be proud of. We need to act with integrity in everything we do. There is no business result worth more than your personal integrity or your company's integrity. We would rather have a bad financial result than to take the shortcut. And it shows our commitment in our integrity is reflected in our actions, from ensuring that our food and products are safe, as well as we using technology, data, ethically and responsibly, to investigating concerns by our customers, associates, and our stakeholders. If we can move on to the next slide. What did we have to learn quickly during this pandemic? I'm no technical person, and I'm sure we all get annoyed with IT and the service that we get from them sometimes. But I'm sure getting employees to work fully remotely would have taken months of planning and execution from our IT team. I think if we ask anyone in our companies how long our IT team would have been able to do this, it might have taken between 2 to 3 years. But guess what? IT delivered at a pace they had never been before, and our staff was remotely working in just a few weeks. Online sales for us were no longer nice to have, but a necessity. Technology played a huge role for our survival and definitely creating new risks in compliance. If I can talk about some of the direct impacts that COVID had on our compliance team, we have a compliance monitoring team that goes out to our stores and facilities to ensure that our compliance program is effective. This team had to quickly increase the use of technology and to perform remote walkthroughs via Zoom and virtual meetings and WhatsApps to ensure that our compliance programs were still effective at our facilities. With the reorganization of our staff and management, we also had to reduce disruption to our stores. What this meant was we had to collaborate with other departments like our enterprise risk management, our audit teams, and several other departments to find ways to collaborate and ensure that we were not causing disruption to our business. With immersion risks, we had to ensure policies and procedures were updated, implemented, and associates were trained on time. If we can move on to the next slide, please. What did we have control of? Ensuring the organization stays abreast of laws and regulatory requirements relevant to the business is one of the key roles to our compliance team. I personally have lost count on the number of POPIA messages I have received from a personal and professional capacity, and I'm sure you guys have as well. These words, POPIA, were definitely trending during the last couple of months. I think if it wasn't COVID, it was POPIA. And another familiar word in my vocabulary was EPR regulation. For those of you who are familiar with the new environmental laws. What's important to note is that we are very well aware of POPIA and other regulations that were coming out, which gives us control. And it was very easy to implement in our business. One of our key terms used by our compliance leadership team is obsessed with talent. What does that mean? It simply means getting the right people to do the right job. And at Massmart, this is one of our key aspects of getting the person with the most knowledge on the subject matter. And that's definitely what we strive to do. We have a compliance team that covers 14 different compliance subject matter areas. And it's important for us to invest in these people and ensure that we have the right people. As sure as we had a COVID task team, we definitely had a POPIA task team to ensure compliance in our business. Appropriate digital materials were created. We had to clearly communicate to the business and leadership what is our expectations. We had to document policies and procedures. The other thing that came along with POPIA was training and awareness. Associates needed to be well trained and consistently reminded of the importance of POPIA. Given that the traditional face-to-face interactions was a very much no-go, it was important to strategize how to have high impact and compliance interactions with our organizations. And as virtual tools became more prevalent and the rules of engagement constantly evolved, it was important to reevaluate on a continual basis the environmental shifts. One of the reasons we chose to partner with the Lexis GRC solution is, as we mature in our compliance program, we needed a compliance tool. I think Gillian also mentioned, how important it is having a compliance tool. And we needed a centralized solution where we were able to access the latest legislative content, regulation, bylaws, and this tool, this Lexis GRC solution, was able to meet our requirements. Not only with that, but also it included plain language for even people in other departments beside compliance and legal to understand what's going on in our business. They were able to give us explanations on these laws. They were also able to help us in our African countries, given the fact that we operate in 13 different countries. They were able to help us with this content as well. And I think that was a very important buy-in for us. As a regulatory manager, I was afforded the ability to look at the tools that were there out in the market. And, GRC and Lexis Assure was the closest meeting our requirements almost 100%. And where we had to adapt, I think we appreciated LexisNexis flexibility and, helping us meet our needs. If we can move on to the next slide. Lastly, I would like to touch on, obviously, the looting that happened last month. The message that came from our leadership was, we will come back stronger. It has been very challenging time for our country. We watched with concern as our personal safety and, was threatened. Our stores were looted, property was damaged. We were concerned for our family back in KZN especially. And the message that came from our leadership was, we will come back stronger. And, over 40 facilities of ours were affected during the looting in Durban and Johannesburg. But definitely as retailers, we are prepared in some way for a disruption in supply. And we were fortunate enough to have business continuity and be able to replenish stock from our backup capacity. Our immediate priority as a company has been, first and foremost, to ensure that our safety and security of our employees and our customers. And we also had to ensure that our other facilities were protected, which meant some of our stores had to close for a few days. We have now activated plans to fully and completely have a business recovery. The damage caused meant that some of our stores will take a while to reopen. I'm sure you guys, we're up to date with the news, and you saw our Pietermaritzburg stores, our stores in Springfield. These stores are going to take a while to open. And, we will only do this until it's safe and practical, and which means that the real estate team has to partner with compliance to ensure that our stores are 100% compliant and safe to open. And as much as this was a challenge for us, we also see it as an opportunity. And yesterday in our town hall, our retail real estate team spoke about how this forces us to, be innovative and creative. And while we're rebuilding stores, we'll definitely take it to another level and, be creative. I've been with the compliance team and I've been with the company for 9 years now, and I've really enjoyed being part of this compliance team, because at Massmart, they're so committed and passionate about compliance, and so am I. So it's really fitting, and that is why, I've stayed so long with this company. I want to leave you with 2 quotes from Sam Walton. If you could move on to the last slide. Yeah, Sam Walton, for those of you who don't know Sam Walton, is the founder of the Walmart Group. And, you know, these two quotes very personally resonates with me. And, you know, as sure as the world keeps turning, it will keep changing. Our industry is changing with increasing digitization and new innovative working practice. What can be sure is that something new will come every month of the month or year, and we need to be prepared as a compliance team. And if I could just read the two quotes. You can't keep doing what works one time. Everything around you is changing. To succeed, stay out in front of change. And the next one is you can make a positive out of the most negative if you work hard at it enough. So the first one is to succeed, stay out in front of change. So what we need to do as a compliance team, especially with, you know, technology, we need to stay in front of this change and make positive out of the most negative. I mean, last month's looting was definitely a negative impact on our business, but we are trying to keep positive, and Massmart will come back stronger. Thank you, Basman. I'll hand over back to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Stephanie, and thank you for sharing all your insights on your business and how you run with things in Massmart. And without me going into too much detail and recapping, because we've literally got 7 minutes left, there's a couple of questions as well. But definitely one of the things that came out, and I just want to touch on that, is that it is not something that you do in isolation. The compliance officer, the risk manager's work or professional needs to see it in all areas. And I think those were your words, needs to see it in all areas. And only through that can you really reach success and manage your compliance. Just a quick, and it's off the point, but I found in an article yesterday on the costs of compliance, or the cost of non-compliance versus the cost of ensuring compliance. And the cost of non-compliance is something like 2.7 times the cost of ensuring compliance. So just from that perspective as well, it's quite important to know and sometimes to work that out and to communicate to your boards and your execs. That was from the UK. So those numbers, it may vary to the point, you know, in different countries and so forth. But that's really the reality. If we can go over to questions, then Stephanie, I'm gonna start with you, and I'm gonna combine some of it. As I said, we've got very little time left, and there's quite a number of questions. Gillian, thank you. I see you also joined again. First question to you is: do you agree that POPIA is not consent-driven legislation? That's the first one, and I think I'm gonna just combine these two questions. And the other question, I think it's from the same person, Quentin, thank you. Can compliance ever be ensured, given that compliance is always a never-ending journey and not a final destination? So can compliance ever be ensured, given what it is? And then do you agree that POPIA is not consent-driven legislation? Those are just the two questions specifically for you. And from your viewpoint, Stephanie?
Sorry, Basman, I just had some connection issues.
Did you get the? Are you good?
Yeah. Can you just repeat the question?
So the questions were: can compliance ever be ensured, given that compliance is always a never-ending journey and not a final destination? And then, secondly, do you agree that POPIA is not consent-driven legislation?
I don't think compliance can ever be ensured from my perspective. It is always a never-ending journey, and it's always going to evolve. And that is why I said, you know, change. The only thing constant in life is change, and especially with compliance, I think that's very relevant as well. Do you agree that POPI is not a consent-driven legislation? I don't know, Quentin, if you could just elaborate on that.
Okay, shall we leave that and ask
Yeah.
to just raise the question there for now? Maybe need a little bit more detail. Otherwise, we will forward you the question also if we don't manage to complete that. Just before I continue with going through the questions, you will note that there is the polls are running. So if you can please, you can move the box out of the way also. And if you can please just complete that for us. As I mentioned right in the beginning, it is important for LexisNexis just to have a good feel of what your needs are. Do we need to run more of these sessions? Today's really went so well. I think in the same category, we can probably run another 1 or 2 of these webinars. Right, then just a question, and I don't know if this is specifically for you, Stephanie, or if it's for Gillian, and I can probably also answer it, but what is the difference between a risk compliance officer and risk officer? I've got my views, but I don't know if any of you want to step in here. Maybe Stephanie, you from a practical point, how your business is running. You said that risk and compliance is working quite closely. However, compliance is obviously very much legislation, regulatory driven, and identifying the risk exposures to the business, and your risk or your risk officer or professional, it's more the broader scope of risk, strategic, operational, etc. But I can leave it to one of you, Stephanie or Gillian, maybe to comment on if any of you wish.
Boss, I don't mind taking on a little bit, but just from a high level point of view, and I need to step out in 1 minute, okay? I mean, ideally, you know, you do want your risk and your compliance teams to be working together because, as we said earlier, there's that direct balance. I do often have a concern with your risk and compliance officer being one person. They should be very different animals. I mean, if we speak about the role and you know, in terms of what I described, in terms of what your risk officer needs to be, that kind of personality with that kind of EQ, that drive would potentially be a very different animal from your compliance officer. So to have a combined role there could potentially be in conflict, you know, and that control that compliance brings into that risk professionals world it's essentially that's what they're doing. They're providing that control and that mechanism. So to have that combination, I've got a concern with that, and that is from a professional point of view and my point of view. I know it works effectively for some organizations, but you do need to question then, are you being as effective as possible? So, boss, I'm not sure what your thoughts are, but I do see these being 2 separate areas that do need to collaborate extremely strongly. They really need to understand what they're doing, but to have it in as one role, it could potentially create another issue. So, but thank you. Yeah, and thanks so much, boss. I do need to slip out, and I'm sure Stephanie probably has a view on that as well.
Yes, yes, I do.
Thank you,
Gillian. I definitely agree with both Bosman and Gillian. I think recently with our reorganization as well, a compliance and our enterprise risk management sits separately. And as Bosman mentioned, you know, compliance looks after regulatory compliance, but there's a very fine line in terms of the teams working together, and they do have to work closely together. Given the GRC solution as well, if you look at it, enterprise risk management and compliance auditing and monitoring sits together and works closely together.
Good. Thank you so much for your views on that, Stephanie. And yeah, I think we have come to the end of our session. I think we just ran out of time. There are a couple of other questions also, Magdalene and from Pearl. We will cover those and we will get responses to you. There's so much to take away from this session. I'm not gonna go over the notes because then we will just go 5, 6, 7 minutes, 10 minutes over. But one thing, one question that we have to ask ourselves is, how ready are we ever, and I'm talking about going forward, and how ready were we in the past? We know what's happened, you know, and how quickly things changed. And something that came out earlier on is, what do we have on our risk radar? And did we have all of these things that happened on our risk radar? And one of the people on the chat box said, no, we didn't have it on our risk radar, but we were lucky. And I think a lot of us were lucky. But with that said, thank you so much to Stephanie and to Gillian. It was a great session, and we're looking forward to seeing all of you again. Look out for our next webinar. Look out for the recording of this session. And also, we will talk to the presenters about the slides. There were a lot of requests about getting the presentations. We will chat to them. But thank you so much. Stay safe. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.